All right, welcome back to Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David Wilcock. I'm here with Corey Goode, and in this episode, we are doing a special investigation into Sergeant Clifford Stone. I was fortunate enough to meet him at the Disclosure Project event in May 2001 when he first came forward as a member of a UFO crash retrieval team and someone who has gotten his hands dirty in terms of actually releasing documents through the Freedom of Information Act that had never before seen the light of day. So what we're going to do now is show you some footage of our interview with Stone, and then we're going to have some comments on it. In this first round, you're going to hear him describing two of the classified programs with the code names that he was involved with involving crash retrieval and his work in getting those documents out. Let's take a look.
I had to go on a search for the documentation to kind of sort of validate me to my family. They were there. My wife knows more about it than my kids do, but, you know, I'll be criticized by my kids because I wasn't there for that game. I wasn't there for this social event, things of this sort. And see, I was a clerk. I wasn't supposed to do all this stuff. I wasn't supposed to go to the field all the time. They did not know what went on. Now, my wife did, because, like I said before, she was there from the beginning. But I initially wanted to go ahead and validate myself. I wanted to validate myself to my family. But also, towards the end of the time that I was getting out, I saw all the horrible things that was happening to people who were witnesses of UFOs. I saw the people who were ridiculed. I saw the people who lost their families because they just happened to be a witness to an event of high strangeness. I know of people who have killed themselves. I know people who have lost their jobs. I know people who have become recluses because society in which they live rejected them because they happen to be involved in an event of high strangeness. And they made the big mistake of talking about it. And since at least 1973, Operation Ridicule, and that's what I call it, because there really is a directed effort by our government and other governments of the world to ridicule anyone who comes out and talks about having anything to do with UFOs. And you're even encouraged in the military if you have an event, or if you're an airline pilot, don't talk. It will destroy your career. It will ultimately destroy your life. So the whole situation is I had to try to get some confirmation that it's okay to have these incidents, these events to occur in your life. And if I could get that confirmation officially from the record, it'd go a long way to help people. I think the most amazing documents that I have unearthed, and I have to put them together, is the confirmation of moon dust and blue fly as they pertain to objects of unknown origin. Moon dust is the overall field exploitation program for only two items: objects of non-U.S. origin that survives re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. And of course, these would have a intelligence value to the intelligence community to determine what the state of technology is that went into that particular craft from a potentially hostile government to the U.S. The other item is objects of unknown origin. Within unknown origins, UFOs fall into play there. Okay, these documents went ahead and show where we recovered various objects of unknown origin. And we brought them back to the States and we were looking at it. As a matter of fact, the NSA even had what was called a fragmentology lab, where they would look at fragments. Now, there was a great debate between the intelligence community and NASA, because NASA felt that they should have total control. The CIA made it quite clear that while NASA sometimes works hand in hand with the CIA, NASA is primarily a scientific endeavor. Covert operations of an intelligence nature lies within the intelligence community. So initially, all these objects would go to the intelligence side of the house. If NASA was to get an object of unknown origin, they would, without question, turn it over to various agencies within the intelligence community. Then after the intelligence community did what they could with it, they would turn it back over to NASA for NASA to turn over to the launching authority, the country that put the spacecraft up there to begin with. But here again, if it was an object of unknown origin and it turned out not to be of this world, NASA would not get anything back on it. But NASA did have debris of unknown origin that was within their fractology lab. 1985, the name moon dust and blue fly was the actual field teams that went out to the field to do the covert extraction and also be there in case there was a need for a cover story or what have you, and get it back to a safe haven area, in a rear echelon area, and ultimately back to facilities in the United States. So I went ahead and I did a 178-page report entitled Operation Blue Fly Research Project, Report to Congress. And I went ahead and I sent it to 27 various members of Congress, Senate and the House. Our senator here, he took it to several other senators that were involved in the Armed Services Committee that was holding hearings actually on some, and remember this is 94, this is when the big questions about what really happened here at Roswell came into play. Some of the people behind closed doors, because UFOs is not a good subject to get messed up with, you know, if you're an elected official. Ask some people about, whoa, wait a minute. They did recoveries. This document shows that. We need to know what really is going on. In short, I know for a fact that report that I did in 94 caused them to expose the National Reconnaissance Organization. And the reason they had to expose it was real simple. They wanted Congress to understand that, well, you know, we have highly classified reconnaissance activities that involve highly sophisticated and highly classified manned, I'm going to say it, unmanned, manned and unmanned satellites. And there aren't supposed to be any manned satellites, but there are. And the situation is, with this being the case, if they fall back to Earth, it is imperative that we get them before any potential enemy of the United States gets them, or any potential future enemy of the United States gets them. And we must get them and get them back here to the States, or to a safe haven area. So they started talking about the nice activities on a very low key, but at least it got the exposure that it needed. Then, of course, little demons like me went in and started to ask, what more do you have on the NRO?
All right, so this is a little bit more of a down-to-earth type of ufology than some of the stuff we talk about up in space, but still a very important part of what's being done in order to keep the UFO cover-up going. In the clip, he described moon dust as the umbrella program that is essentially looking at threats to the United States. Blue Fly is the actual team. What's the amount of prevalence that you think is happening with these types of programs? How many retrievals are being done in, let's say, a given year?
And I haven't seen information for some time on, so I don't know currently. But back before the time of about 1986, they were occurring on a semi-regular basis. I don't know, you know, there'd be like maybe 4 to like 12 in a year.
When we're looking at a guy like Stone involved in something like this, first of all, do you feel that there are a large number of people that were doing the kind of thing that he was doing and they're deployed at different times?
Yeah, they try to deploy the same groups. Sometimes there will be, they'll send other military assets out to secure the location, but they'll form a perimeter far away so they can't see what they're securing. And then they'll bring in one of these other teams that specialize in retrievals.
And we know that Stone's work is intuitively interfacing with the beings if they're still alive in the crash. And in some of the other footage that we've seen, he gets very upset about that. Is it normal that the extraterrestrials operating in our airspace are going to have a telepathic ability like that?
Yes, that's actually quite common. And it's a lot easier to communicate that way than verbally. If you have a species that's from another star system, they come here, even if, they'd have to study us and then know all the nuances of our language to really communicate. It's really hard to misunderstand when you're interfacing.
He described the awesome amount of effort that was put in place to ridicule anyone who talks about UFOs in any way at all. And as far as you know, is this a program that was designed from the very, very beginning of the UFO phenomenon?
Yes, and it's a documentation going back to the very beginning of when we see that the government was investigating UFOs. It's very clear that from the beginning they wanted to ridicule anyone, no matter how professional they were, that had reported seeing a UFO or their occupants.
How do you think that something like this could have been successful given the awesome level of interest in being visited by people from another world?
Well, in the 50s, if you look at the news, footage of them interviewing contactees or people that saw UFOs, it was the way they shot it, the way they made the people look ridiculous. So the mainstream doesn't have as large of an interest in this. So if the subject comes up, they'll listen and then move on with their day because they're not taking it serious because the media is not.
Well, I think that may be changing a lot more now as media becomes increasingly decentralized. It would certainly appear that the media is an opinion maker and people have a very serious fear of ridicule. So do you think that this fear of ridicule was effective enough to stop many people who did see things from coming forward at all?
Well, people that had something to lose, like he mentioned, pilots, people that worked in various professional fields where they'd put a lot of time and effort into getting an education or certifications. Those people, they have a lot to lose, so they'll talk quietly amongst themselves, but they're not going to talk openly.
Do you think that the U.S. government always saw UFOs as a threat, or do you think that they were aware that some of this was completely benign, but they chose to have a military type of reaction to it anyway?
Well, whether it was a positive or a negative group visiting, it didn't matter. Both of them threatened the status quo, which allowed them to control the Earth. So no matter which polarity these beings are, they have us programmed to believe a certain way. That's going to change the paradigm, and they're going to lose their grip.
Do you feel to some degree that there's a generational gap going on here in which people who grew up in the era of media ridicule and indoctrination still have this fear of being ostracized from the group if they get into this, whereas younger people are not seeing that anymore and therefore they're far more open-minded?
Well, younger people are spending most of their time on social media where you don't have the mainstream media delivering news that's approved from the government.
Right.
So they're getting a much wider spectrum of information than people used to. So you see the consciousness expanding of the younger people.
Well, I don't know about where you are in Dallas, Texas, but Corey, I have never met someone who was not interested in UFOs when I brought it up. Never. And it could be just any random person. They ask me what I do, the dreaded 4 words, what do you do? Have you ever experienced people actually having problems with it? I mean, it seems very rare to me.
Yeah, it depends, I guess your location, but in the Dallas area, if you talk about aliens and UFOs, people will humor you, kind of watch, look at you, but you can see on their face that they're just like ready for the conversation to end so they can walk away.
Really?
Yeah.
When these programs eventually collapse, what do you think those types of people are going to have happen to them?
First, they'll probably go into denial, and then acceptance, just like the steps of grieving. They've got to change their paradigm. All their belief systems now, they've got to hold up and compare to the new information. That's not comfortable for anyone.
All right, well, what we're going to go to now is an interview with Stone, part of our interview with him, where he describes a very, very intriguing event that took place during the Vietnam War. This is high strangeness, highly interesting. And then after we have this footage, we will be discussing the implications of this very strange story. So without further ado, let's check it out.
Now, with being assigned to Vietnam, I'll wind up getting assigned to Tay Ninh. And when I get there, once again, I'm back in communications, NBC, all that good stuff. I was notorious for a lot of times I'd go outside of the perimeter. You wasn't supposed to do that. I went ahead. I went out one night, and when I went out, there's a helicopter there, and the guy always called the colonel. He's there, and he says, "Why are you late? We've been waiting for you." And I said, "Late? How the heck did you even know I was coming out?" I didn't even know it. Anyhow, we get on the helicopter, and we take off, and we're flying towards Dui Ba Dien. And we're getting, maybe 2/3 of the way up. Now, the problem is, the old adage has always been, we have the top of Dui Ba Dien, and we have the base. The NVA and VC have the center. And we know that they had, tunnels and all that other good stuff there. So when we landed, there was already other military personnel there, and they were hitting up on a tunnel. We were told that the enemy was working on, well, I can even tell you what it was, bubonic plague. They were working on a biological military-type weapon, bubonic plague, that they were going to try to use against U.S. forces there. And we had to go ahead and destroy the facility. So there's this tunnel. And, no one questioned, it was a tunnel. No one questioned the fact that it was D-shaped. It wasn't like a jagged hole in the wall of the mountain, but it was V-shaped. Now, you had the rocks on the top and all, but the ground on the bottom was totally smooth. Once again, we didn't question it. And I don't know whether we thought, well, maybe the VC could have done something with it, or it just didn't come into play. No one questioned it at all. We start to go back into the tunnel. We get several hundred feet into the tunnel, and we can still radio back and talk to the people that's on the outside. Now, we get to one point, and it's like a line in the sand, so to speak, because on this side, you can talk, you can hear clearly on the radio. You step across that, now you can't. So we went ahead and left a radio there, and we set up a field telephone, 312, and we left a radio telephone operator right there. And he was to communicate with the folks on the outside, and we went on into the cave. And I don't know how many hundreds of feet we went on into the cave, but at some point it got to the point where we couldn't talk on that 312, calling him back. It just wouldn't work. Nothing wrong with the batteries or nothing, but we just couldn't carry on a conversation. We go ahead, we go further into the cave, then as we get closer we start to see it's starting to get lighter. And we can't identify the light source. Then we step in this big open area inside the cave. When we step in there, we go ahead and see what appears to be a huge laboratory. And on the other side, there's this huge, like, I call it a window. And we could see some of our troops outside that window that appeared like they were just walking on air, because there's no ground there. You know, you could see the night sky perfect, everything, no problem. And you're wondering, okay, what's going on now? It's hard to explain, but you know, you're not seeing them silhouetted or anything. I mean, you're seeing it. It's dark, but you're seeing them. After we couldn't call back, we had a person that became the runner, and he went back to tell the radio telephone operator. So there's a little delay in that getting back to say, hey, tell these people to do that, but we could see them. And we went ahead and asked, you know, are these people out there? And they had them do certain things so we could tell that these were the people. And, you know, we asked them, can you see anything out of the ordinary? And no, but everyone's looking towards the sky. And we're, no, don't look towards the sky, look towards the ground. Is there anything out of the ordinary on the ground? No one saw anything out of the ordinary. And of course, we see them when we look to the ground. We tell them to do specific things so we can tell that there are troops. We went ahead, watched that, and we knew, hey, this is happening in real time. This isn't a screen and they're hitting up on pictures, and it's just unusual to us because it's a technology that we're not familiar with. Now, to us that was inside the cave, we were witnessing all this. The ones on the outside of the cave, nothing was unusual. But we told the ones on the outside of the cave, take their entrenching tools and dig up a couple of scoops of earth. Let's see what happens. We could see inside the cave where they'd go ahead, put the entrenching tools into the ground. But it was like they were going into clear air. But when they picked up the entrenching tool and tossed the earth that was on the entrenching tool, we could see it go through the air, but when it hit the ground, it would just be like it would just totally disappear again. I guess I can say I found it fascinating. But at the same time, no explanation on why it's going on. I mean, and we were trying to think of a plausible explanation. Is there cameras on the outside? This wasn't like a screen. This was like a window. And it covered the whole side. And it was not like a screen at all. Like a projection screen or what today we have with our TVs, flat screen TV. It was nothing like that at all. All of a sudden we start seeing, once again, typical grays. Someone asked me to try to describe them because I really can't, because I only know what you'd call typical grays, and by the large heads, small spindly bodies, and the large eyes. They didn't say anything, but they came up and people started to shoot. And I was trying to tell people to cease fire, because by this time, you know, I already knew we wasn't alone there. And when I was telling them to cease fire, you know, it didn't happen. So what I did, I went ahead and I asked them, or I was still asking them, and all of a sudden it got white, like, you know, there was a glow to it, but it was like you were in the middle of a glass of milk. It wasn't fluid or anything. You could breathe easily, not all that good stuff, but you could hold your hand up like this in front of your face, and you couldn't see it because it was just a, shall I say, fluorescent white that surrounded everyone. And I could still hear the shooting going around. All of a sudden, I got something. My eye was very painful. And I remember trying to grab a hold of my eye, and I went down. And I remember it was agonizing pain. And after I went down, that was the last thing I remembered. I remember hearing a voice saying that they need to let my people take care of me. And another voice saying, no, there's no way that they can fix this. We need to take care of this person, or he will lose his left eye. Later on, I woke up. I was outside of the cave, and I looked up at the captain, or the guy I always called the major, and I said, or the colonel, how did I get out here? How did I get out here? And he told me, he said, well, we don't know. One moment you wasn't there, then all of a sudden you're there. Then he even asked me, what happened to your eye? I said, I don't know. And they went ahead, and the medic said it had been worked on. But it was our people that put the patch on it. And for over a week, I wore that. The official story was that there was a bug that sprayed a spray into my eye and sprayed it and hit the corona of the eye and cut it all the way across. And I'm going to tell you right now, I know no bug that can do that, even in the tropics or any place. And I have talked and asked other people what type of bug could do that. And I've had experts tell me there is no bug that can do that. But I had no problem. I wear reading glasses, but I have no problem with my sight.
All right, so in a case like Stone's, it appears that here's a guy who is actually getting extraterrestrial contact all throughout his life. Do you think that there are certain people who are receiving weird events like this throughout their lives for some greater reason of some kind?
Absolutely. And the military intelligence knows who are having these experiences. They monitor them.
How do they know?
Well, they're tracking all of these different craft flying around. If a craft is visiting a certain area, they will go and usually re-abduct the people to find out what occurred for gathering intelligence. So yes, there are a large number of people that have experiences. Many don't remember them, but they are watched.
So what do you think is the end game of a group like the Greys having this large laboratory inside a strange cave in Vietnam? What might they be doing in there?
Well, they're obviously doing some sort of either examinations on the locals or some sort of science that they want to keep hidden. So a good, perfect way to hide it is to put it in that cave. But it's in the middle of a war zone. It would be very nice to know what type of a lab it was, what what was going on in the area, to be able to determine what this group of extraterrestrials were doing with this lab.
Do you think that it's possible that they would have an interest in wars and want to monitor wars for some specific purpose?
Well, sure, there's a number of different non-terrestrials that monitor our wars, but a lot of the times they have assets, human assets, people that they have abducted or have had contact with, and they will keep those assets safe. They'll track them and monitor them during conflict.
Do you think it's common for there to be bases that extraterrestrials have where you actually could just walk into maybe a slightly unusually perfect-looking cave or something?
Well, most likely the mouth of the cave had a hologram or something across it that hid it. It would be very unusual for them to have just a big open, strangely shaped entrance that's going to attract attention, unless it's some sort of honey trap.
Right, so that could have been something where they knew Stone was going to be there, and maybe they turned the hologram off so that he would go into that cave or something.
Possibly, yeah.
What kind of technology could allow them to be able to look through soil as if it wasn't even there, like it's just a pane of glass? They
have different imaging technologies. They could most likely even look through that window and see their own planet if they wanted to. To us, it's magic.
Well, it appears that the dirt was under some control, because he said that when they dug the dirt out, it was visible, and then when it was thrown, it was visible, but as soon as it hit the ground, it became invisible again.
Right.
Is there something they could do to the matter state of the soil, maybe, to make it so it's not visible while it's on the ground?
Well, they're not affecting the matter. What they're doing is the technology is kind of like it's just like a filter. It's filtering out the information being delivered to the technology about the soil and all of that.
And when he said that he saw a huge lab, he didn't get into detail about what the lab looked like, but if this was a lab that was run by Gray-type extraterrestrials, would he have been seeing something that would look pretty different than any normal lab on Earth?
You would know immediately that this was not a terrestrial lab run by human beings. And also, remember that after they got a certain distance inside the cave, they hit a dampening field of sorts to where their radios and field phones didn't work, with cables run even.
Right. So that's some sort of electromagnetic scramble effect, maybe?
Yeah, I've just heard them called dampening fields.
Okay.
Yeah, that prevent any type of radio waves and that kind of thing from penetrating.
So what do you think was happening when he and his fellow soldiers got surrounded by this marshmallow-type fluorescent energy that they couldn't see, 1 foot through? What do you think was going on there?
It was a defensive technology. I've heard of similar things to where people will go in to a craft or somewhere where they're not supposed to be, and then there's a big flash of light that lasts. It lasts longer than a flash. It's like it stays. It comes on and stays. And it sounds like he was teleported out of there.
Is this something that these Greys could do with their own consciousness, or do they have a technology that would require it to be used that way?
Well, I read reports that they could defend themselves without carrying weapons. So this was either something that was implanted in them technology-wise, or it's through their consciousness.
There does seem to be some benevolence in these beings. They cared about his eye. So what kind of technology do you think they might have had to heal his eye? It seems like he got hit by a bullet or something, maybe. We're not really sure.
Yeah, from what I've read in the smart glass pads, the human body is very easy to manipulate and repair. So they have to have some sort of tissue regeneration, nerve regeneration technology.
Is a story as ridiculous as an insect hitting his eye? Is that a common thing for the military to do when they're faced with this stuff?
Yeah, they have twisted ankles, any type of injury. There are all kinds of explanations, official explanations they'll put out.
So with a guy like Stone having experience of this nature, and we talked a little earlier about the idea of people having these experiences throughout their life and being monitored, do the extraterrestrials have the ability to control who would be able to find a facility like this? In other words, was he allowed to see this, and was it because he was a certain person? Or are there cases of just ordinary people that could randomly find something like this and stumble in on it?
I think it's very rare for someone to stumble across something like this. And when he arrived, it had already been found. So he was coming up to a situation to where they had already found something and they were sending him in later.
Right.
And as I stated before, most likely before it was found, either there was something covering the entrance. There was most likely something covering the entrance, and either that technology failed or was turned off for a purpose.
Do you think that the Greys already knew that they were in there when the Greys showed themselves?
Yes. They probably came because some sort of an alarm was set off.
Do you think the Greys are confident enough in their ability to thwart human machine gun type of artillery that they could just walk right up even though these guys are fully armed and might be shocked by what they're seeing?
Yes, they will walk right through gunfire or towards people firing at them.
So it really poses no threat to them at all?
No threat whatsoever when they have the proper technology. There have been plenty of instances of non-terrestrials, including Greys, being shot by military.
Oh, there are?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's some kind of technology that they're using?
Most likely a technology, consciousness, or a mixture of both.
One of the things that's very strange that this reminds me of was a guy I knew who had been in touch with one of the top 90 people in the cabal, so he said. And he was given briefings on various extraterrestrial technology that had been found. And he described a particular river, I believe it's the Potomac River around Washington, D.C., and that there was a egg that was found inside that was very metallic. It was deep inside the sand, and they couldn't open it for a long time, but it looked very exotic. And eventually they realized a dog whistle would open it when they blow the dog whistle. And this thing goes like this, and it popped open. And what it had inside of it was a whole series of actual Polaroid-type photographs of major events that had taken place in that river, apparently including a military blockade where a chain had been pulled across the river to stop ships from getting in. So this was just like a little drone device that again seems to suggest that certain extraterrestrials are very keen on observing our wars and our history and seeing what takes place and when it took place.
Yes, and there are small drones that go around and observe people in situations that you cannot see with the naked eye, just like on the movie They Live. You know, when he looks up and sees a drone flying around, that type of technology is in use by the non-terrestrials.
All right, well, this has been a really fascinating investigation. Stone is obviously one of the most impressive whistleblowers because he's coming at us from the perspective of the crash retrievals like Roswell, being there and doing it multiple times. This is a fascinating investigation. This is Cosmic Disclosure. I'm David Wilcock here with Corey Goode and our special guest Sergeant Clifford Stone, and I thank you for watching.